Hey everyone, welcome to the second and last part of our workshop on introductions and conclusions. We're now going to transition over to conclusions. If an introduction is meant to be the first impression of your essay, the conclusion is meant to be the lasting impression. I think because it's the last paragraph that the audience reads, in a lot of ways, it ends up being more memorable or has the potential to be memorable, which is why there are 4 pieces of advice I would like to give when writing conclusions. Number 1, you want to leave your audience thinking. You don't ever want them to be like, okay, next. You want them to actually think about the material that you just covered, maybe to continue thinking about it even after they have cast your essay aside. You sometimes also want to leave your audience feeling a certain emotion, and you might want to target that exact emotion. Is it positivity? Is it optimism? Is it regret or sorrow? There's so many different emotions you might be thinking of, so that's what you want to target when you are writing your conclusion. You also want to leave your audience with some curiosity. Don't, obviously, you want to clarify any confusion they have, but don't give away so much that your audience loses interest in the topic. So obviously, if the topic itself is a debatable topic, it's going to be interesting from the get-go, but you always want to leave your audience just curious to know more. And that has a lot to do with the way that you approach your conclusion. And of course, if it's necessary, you might want to persuade your audience. Persuading your audience means that you have convinced them and they have the potential to take action as a result of your writing. That is very powerful. If you can persuade somebody to act in a way that you want them to act, that takes a whole lot of skill. So if you don't necessarily persuade them to act, you might actually end up convincing them to agree with your position, which is good enough for an essay. There are 2 parts to a conclusion. Notice how the introduction had 3 parts and it tended to be a little bit longer. Well, conclusions are short, sweet, to the point. So first part is you want to restate your position. This is your thesis. You don't want to copy paste your thesis in the exact same words that you used in your introduction. That's not going to be a very good strategy. If your audience notices that you are so lazy that you can't even reword your thesis, that you're just wording it exactly the way you wrote it in your intro, that's not a very good impression you are setting on the audience. So of course, use different language, approach it in a different way, change it around. And you want to end your conclusion with another interesting hook. Some writers go back to the hook that they used in their introduction. They basically reuse that one as a way to come full circle. Other writers, they like to use another hooking strategy. So again, you might want to end with a quote to leave us thinking about something on a deeper level, maybe a fact that you found that you would like your audience to think about. Maybe you want to create an anecdote in your conclusion instead of your introduction. Maybe you want to draw a comparison. A hypothesis is like a what if scenario, and that's usually good when you want to speculate in your conclusion. So anytime you want to speculate, conclusions are the best places to do that. You might want to, again, ask a few intriguing questions or end your essay with an observation. No matter what strategy you choose, the ultimate goal is to leave your readers with something, so that they are not bored and they are thinking about your essay even after they're done reading it. So I did provide, again, 2 sample conclusions, again, student samples. Let's read this one. First of all, what is the topic? I had my students, and this is from a few years ago, I had my students writing an essay analyzing this quote. The ancient Chinese sage Lao Tzu said, "Softness triumphs over hardness, feebleness over strength, What is more flexible is always superior over that which is immovable. This is the principle of controlling things by going along with them, of mastery through adaptation. So my question was that I had my students answer, how does Lao Tzu's philosophy apply to the way we choose to live our everyday lives? And that's the question students had to answer. Here is the sample conclusion. And again, I made this like a pretty big font. Notice that it's not a very long conclusion. What is it? Maybe 4 sentences? That's about it. And it doesn't have to be super long. A conclusion can even, if you think about it, be 2 or 3 sentences. It's short, sweet, to the point. Here's what my student wrote. Finally, we come back to the words of a wise teacher wanting to give his students hope. Some would say Lao Tzu is giving false hope, that the lamb will not survive long in a jungle full of lions. But that would only be a surface level understanding of his words. I do not believe he wanted to give his students false hope. On the contrary, he wanted his students to realize their full potential and embrace it. Lao Tzu wanted the lamb to conquer his fear and start running with the lions. I don't know, I thought that conclusion resonated with me when I read the students' work. So I'm going to have you guys press pause on me and complete practice 6 and practice 7. So the first question I would like you to answer is, what does the writer leave us thinking about? How are we supposed to feel? Again, if a conclusion is meant to be a way for you to restate your thesis and to leave your audience with something to think about, what is that something? And if it's supposed to make your audience feel a certain way, well, what do you think that emotion is that the writer is targeting? So again, give your ideas in practice 6. And then for practice 7, why don't we try to figure out the student's thesis one more time? Again, the conclusion is supposed to include a restatement of the writer's thesis. What do you think the claim of this writer is, and what do you think the rationale or rationales are? And again, press pause, go ahead and complete these 2 practices. I have one last example for you guys, and this is again another student sample. And here is the question that the student was answering. Should social media websites like Twitter ban the accounts of individuals who post offensive speech? So this was a very popular topic. I gave it just a couple years ago, actually. And this is the conclusion I got from a student. This conclusion, again, I made it a bigger font. It's not super long, but it is longer than the previous one. So let's read this together. Let me leave you with the words of George Orwell in his chilling novel 1984. Every book has been rewritten. Every picture has been repainted. Every statue and street and building has been renamed. Every date has been altered. History has stopped. Nothing exists except an endless present in which the party is always right. Orwell wrote these words in 1948, depicting a nightmare society where the party controlled every word, action, and even individual thought. Seems far-fetched, right? But think about it. Who controls media, including social media, has power to shape the truth to fit what they deem right, to sway ideas in favor of their agenda, and to brainwash impressionable minds to embrace their cause? Forget critical thinking and individuality. Forget free speech. Hello, political correctness and cancel culture. Nothing exists except an endless present in which Twitter is always right. I don't know. I thought when I read this conclusion, I got goosebumps. And I thought the student did a fabulous job. So I'm going to have you guys analyze this. For practice 8, again, What does the writer leave us thinking about, and how are we supposed to feel? So going back to the conclusion, again, don't forget that the ultimate goal is to leave us with something to think about or leave us with something to feel. What do you think that is? Try to target the exact emotion and try to target the exact goal that the writer might have had. And practice 9, let's try to figure out this student's thesis. Again, just identify the claim and the rationale, or it might be more than one rationale, which you should also identify. So I'm just curious how you guys see that, because I do think this conclusion is a little bit harder compared to the previous one. So please spend your time on it, reread it, and go ahead, complete practice 8 and 9. We are now ready for practice 10. This is the practice that we can potentially use in our first essay. So I am going to have you guys write an introduction and conclusion following the steps that I detailed in this workshop. I would like you, again, your introduction should have a hook. It should introduce the topic clearly and with context, and it should have a thesis. Your conclusions should restate your thesis, and it should leave us with something profound to think about or feel. These are the topics for our essay. We've already gone through it. We went over it in our Zoom meeting. And at this point, you probably have thought about these topics over and over again. This is your opportunity to now select which one you wish to focus on for our first essay. I ask you, just for your sake, to stick with the one you choose. So whichever choice you select, that's the one that you will be committing to for this essay. For your introduction, I would like you to have all of these elements: your hook, your topic, your thesis. For your conclusion, again, you restate your position and you leave us with something that is going to resonate. And I did want to also remind you that if you did forget the hooking strategies, I listed them again for you. Or you can go back to the beginning of the slideshow and read it over again. The slideshow should be open on your browser. You can always open it and watch my examples again. Please feel free to go back to my student samples, look at what they did, compare it with yours, and ultimately, practice number 10 is going to have a fully written paragraph introduction and a fully written paragraph, a conclusion. And if these paragraphs are successful, what we're going to do is use them in our first essay. Why not? So that concludes our introductions and conclusions workshop. I hope it's a helpful one, and I look forward to reading your work.